Hello. Hey. It's very nice to be here. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to talk about designing conversational interfaces. You just had my introduction yet that I'm Dutch and I live in Berlin, so I apologize, but my German isn't good enough to give this talk in German yet. But I recently, I used to be the CTO of a game company, a game consultancy, and as part of my work at Hubbub, I learned a lot about chatbots. So we used to make game-like experiences, and we found out that a lot of our experiences looked like chatbots at a certain point. And then after a while, I wrote a book based on our experiences building chatbots and a bunch of research that I did after that. And people always ask me, and like a friend of mine asked me this yesterday even, they're like, yeah, what's the best chatbot that you know? And I just have to tell them, like, I do this professionally, so I have to like see a lot of crap. Like I have to like look at all kinds of chatbots, and most of them aren't really very good. So that's sort of my professional situation. I would say that the best chatbots haven't been made yet. But if we just dive into like what it actually is, this is the edit. This is like an SMS-based record store. So it shows you a record every day, an album, and you can say whether you want to buy it or not, or whether you like it or not. This has generated millions of revenue for this one online store. And it's quite simple, and it learns a bit, but the question is like, is this like a chatbot? Or is it like another marketing channel? So I think if you work in design, you will have experienced this confusion between content and form. And I think here, this is the form of a chatbot. So this is delivered over the medium that chatbots are delivered over. But it's not really a chat. It's not really a conversational interface. So I think you're going to have this confusion a lot, and it helps to like separate the two and see what has the form of a chatbot and what has the content of a chatbot. So if you have this is distorted. This is Amazon's Alexa, and let me just see. And this has no form whatsoever, but you can talk to it. So you can have a conversation with this. And if you think that the form disappears, then the question becomes, what is it that we design? What is remaining for the designers to do in the future where things become more like this? Things started out in this space with this thing called Eliza, if you have ever seen this. This is a chatbot that takes the place of a psychotherapist. So you can talk to it, and it will reflect your ideas and feelings back to you. And this was made in 1966, so that's like over 50 years ago. That's how far we've progressed. And it created the Eliza effect, where people read way more into this than was actually in it. So people thought this was an actual psychotherapist, that this thing had actual access to their inner mental state. From Eliza, we move on to Lark, which is in 2015. This was sort of the category setting application for conversational interfaces. So the thing didn't exist yet. This came out. I used to do a lot of things with fitness applications for work and for also personally. And when we saw this, we were like, maybe we can make all of our applications and games and other things that we do like this. So people understand chat. People understand, this way of interacting. So why not? In 2015, you may have seen this graph. So this was 2015 already, where like the messaging apps have a bit more traffic than the social networking apps. And I'm pretty sure that this hasn't gotten any better for the social networks in the meantime. Back then, when we did some stuff, we sort of sketched out the space, and we had some idea that this was going to be a big deal, but we had like no idea that this was going to be like this big of a deal, that like there was going to be so much stuff happening in the chat space. And I'm pretty sure that this is not like nowhere near ending yet either, because this is the Wall Street Journal article about the next billion users of digital technology. And the idea is that a lot of them are not very literate and do not live in areas where mobile applications and rich websites will be very usable, so network poor, electricity poor areas. And the idea, the general thinking is that a lot of these next billion users will use some form of chat interface, some form of voice-based mediation to technology. And it just goes to show that our attitudes to what is normal in tech and in the world are very unequally distributed. So the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are totally different from what the next billion users will deal with. So I had the idea that you've got the hammer and you can like beat it on everything, and everything it will always work. And maybe you can turn every possible application into a chat application. I've told this and said like, if an app is not for work, if it's not Photoshop or Excel, if it's for fun, which most apps are sort of, then you probably can deliver it over a chat interface. So we've been seeing that take place recently in a couple of fields. So the first one, which is maybe the most boring one, depending on how you work, is the business-to-business use case, where you've got this thing called Slack, which everybody probably knows. And the idea of Slack is that it will suck up all of the data in your company and turn it into this interface. That's sort of an old vision of collaboration, and Slackbot used to exist in a previous life where it was called Clippy. And sort of the same thing, you talk to it and it tries to help you with things. And LinkedIn and Microsoft together also have like a very creepy vision of like what they could do if they had access to all of the data in your company and all of the voice records and everything. But I don't know, I like Slack a lot. And in the beginning, when this trend happened, a lot of studios made the thing that they understood well. So they made a stand-up bot for Slack, where you can like do your daily stand-up meeting using Slack. Or they made Donut, which is particularly silly, but this is an actual need where this sets up dates between colleagues. So if you've got like a bigger organization where people don't talk to each other that much, you set up Donut, and Donut then tells people to go have coffee or have a donut. And it's kind of silly, but it is a use case. It's even sillier. It goes to like apps like this, which is an appreciation tracker, where you can appreciate people in Slack for their accomplishments, and it will make a report of like who did well this month. I'm not really on board with this. But there's lots of really interesting, more serious enterprise applications around knowledge and other things. And one that I'm particularly like is, for instance, this one called Cugun, which is a calendar replacement, which does your calendar for you. And if you know like how terrible calendar applications are, I would be very inclined to like have all my calendaring take place over this interface, where I just tell it I have an appointment, and then whenever an appointment is coming up, it just sends me a message and says like, "Hello, Alper, your appointment is coming up." Well, I think that would sort of like be most of my calendaring use cases solved. So if somebody invites you, it sends you a message and says like, "This and this person has invited you to an appointment. Do you want to go? Yes, no," and then you get like a Slack button. It's pretty neat. But one of the interesting things there is that for a chat application to work that well, like Cugun does, and it does work pretty well, they literally need like hundreds to thousands of rules. Hundreds of thousands of like branches of things to catch, like things you could type into it, things that respond to in a way that makes sense. So it's a lot of work to get this stuff right. If you move on to the more interesting part, we've got the conversational commerce thing, which is more like transactional bots. So they either inform, they sell, or they help you act on stuff. And it's business to consumer. So this is the H&M Kick bot. If you were like me, then you will be like, what is Kick? Which is like a messenger that I never heard existed, but has like lots of users, mostly teens. And this is sort of an actual simple and quick use case that people have. Like you're bored, you need to look at fashion. This thing sends you fashion, and then you can like click on stuff and you get more fashion. And I'm like, yeah, this works. I've used it myself, and it's actually, I can see myself using this. And what you see in most chatbots, like this is like a relatively unknown platform like Kick, is that the content strategy, the content is sort of the same everywhere. Like every chat app has like the same elements and the same things there, and you have an image, you've got some buttons, and so more or less you can recycle the same thing everywhere. But like on all divergent platforms, that less will come back to bite you, of course, eventually. Another interesting example, it's not particularly good. This is the Volkswagen car wizard in chat form, which is sort of as good as they could make it. You have a chat and you answer a bunch of questions and it gives you a car. And that's okay, but then you're like, now what? So it doesn't give you a prize, it doesn't send the car to your house, there's no magic. So I was like, yeah, well, what does it add to the actual use case? And I think you will see here, and in many cases, that chatbots require a digital transformation because they really take an experience and they bear it down to its barest essence. And if that essence isn't good enough, then you're stuck. Like you're like, what do I do? Like, and if you're a small company, maybe you can make that essence better. And if you're a big company, maybe you should change. And we know how that goes for big companies. You've got the Quartz News app, for instance. This is one that was also pretty early out, which I still use. And this fits the news consumption of people like me. You think you're busy, you need the news quickly in sort of text format. It sends you push notifications about headlines, and then you can jump into the application. And you tap about, you say like, I want to read more about this, or I want to go to the next thing. This is sort of the core interaction for any news that I would say. And this is nice, this is great. Quartz do some really interesting things around chatbots and news and chatbots and journalism. And it's quite simple to make, but still requires a non-trivial amount of vision, courage, and budget. I mean, getting this together, getting the editorial staff to like be able to work like this, getting this to like continue, that is quite some organization. Like it's maybe 5 to 10 people within a company, but still, yeah, you need to get stuff to work like that. And what Quartz do particularly nicely, what we also copied, is it talks like a real human being. So they add emojis to the various texts and responses. And we've done a prototype where we had like the prototype with just the text, and then we did the same prototype with the emojis. And it was like a difference between night and day. Like it just feels like there's a human talking to you. It just feels humane. Quartz does some other nice things where it sends you a GIF if you're done with all the news. It says like, you're done with all the news, hurrah, and you get a GIF, which is like all of these like nice touches that you're used to from normal messaging. It can also go badly. This is Poncho, it's a weather bot, and this is a bit too much like a human being. So it sends you weather forecasts, but I guess because at some point they had like a stickiness problem, it also sends you stupid jokes. And I'm like, I'm not interested in the stupid jokes. And then it just keeps spamming you with stuff, and it doesn't really respond well to what you're saying. So you're like, yeah, these people clearly haven't put in the thousands of rules that they need to catch to be able to be a usable chatbot. And that's the other thing, is that a chatbot that acts too smart can only disappoint. So a system needs to wear its affordances and its complexity visibly, so people know what to give it and what not to give it. A great case of expectation management is, for instance, this one. This is the bus uncle, which is in Singapore, and bus uncle talks in Singlish, which is kind of controversial, but in the local environment it makes sense, and it sends you an expectation of like the complexity level that this chatbot would be able to handle. So it's very colloquial, it does certain things really well for you, but you don't want to like overburden it or whatever. At least it's a cultural cue that works well in that particular market. A very limited example, for instance, is this one called MarsBot. It was only released in New York by Foursquare, and it recommends places that you should go to through messages. So this is very similar to the Foursquare notifications, if you ever use Foursquare. So and their push notifications already were really, really good. So what that shows is kind of that you need to start 10 years ago. You need to have all of the prior work to be able to make a chatbot that's interesting. So if people come and say like, you know, we need to make a chatbot, and then we have nothing, we have no data, we have no complexity and things, then sort of the question is like, what can you create that is interesting? What is well, you know, the best time to start is 10 years ago. The second best time is more or less now. This one is great. This is the Duolingo chatbot, where I was like, I was really happy that somebody finally made a good chatbot, that somebody finally made one that was worth using. And this is actually, it's an excellent execution. It took them some time to make it because there was a hype, and then like 6 months later or so, this got released. So you can sort of feel that they took some time and effort to make something in-house and then release this. And I had more people that wanted a chatbot like that, and you've heard this today, is that if you want to make something like that, then you cannot design it. You cannot design a chatbot in Sketch or Photoshop. Like, it's not that sort of a thing. It's you have to put the people together. You have to have the people that don't object to being put together, and they have to make it together. And usually you will need a writer as well. You need like a special kind of writer that will deal well with interactive projects. And you put them all on the same table, like you don't have the design table and the engineering table. You put them on the same area, and you try to get them to work together. And that seems to be really hard. I don't know why. Well, I kind of know why, but it shouldn't be so hard. Another area that's really quickly is marketing automation, where if people are not so often on social media anymore, then how do you reach them? Well, you have to send them messages and things through their private media, through their messaging. So there's lots of websites like Chatfuel that offer you ways to create interactive chat experiences without coding to send to people. So I've had clients use this, so I didn't give them any, I gave them some introduction to the subject, and I gave them the URL to Chatfuel, and I was like, you know, have fun. And then a couple of weeks later, they made their own chatbot to send to their customers, which I think was pretty neat. And finally, I think the most promising part of the experience are the digital assistants. You have Siri, which is the initial digital assistant, I guess. But I only use Siri as a kitchen timer if I have to like boil pasta. I don't know what else it's good for, really. And that's sort of the natural language problem, where you're like, what do we want? Chatbots. When do we want them? And it doesn't, sorry, I don't really understand what you're saying. And I usually recommend people to not use natural language in your problems, because it's really hard to build, it's hard to design with, and it requires very specialistic knowledge to make something functional, and usually you can do without it. You can fake your way around a natural language problem, and initially you should, because you want to like iterate quicker and remove unnecessary complexity in your design process. One way around this is sort of what like Facebook M does, which is their messenger assistant, is it does a human-bot hybrid. So you're talking to a bot most of the time, but maybe sometimes there's a human that responds for you, and then the bot learns from the human, and then the next time it's smarter. And there's a couple of platforms that allow you to do this. So where like a bot can either transparently or explicitly hand over control to a human, and then you can have a customer experience that's better that way. But the gold standard of these kind of digital assistants is I think Xiaoai's. This is a bot on WeChat by Microsoft in China, and you can add this bot also on English WeChat. So, and the funny thing is, well, in China it has like millions and millions of users. It's the persona is it's a young girl, and you can chat with her, and she talks about stuff that you talked about. So if you have exam stress, people have heartbreak, they go to Xiaoai's and they talk to this, and that seems to be very popular. And even in English, because they train this on Chinese social media corpus, and because even the English content in that corpus is big enough, if you talk to Xiaoai's in English, it works. So I'd say like, nice to meet you, and it says to meet you, and I say thanks, and it says you are good, and you cannot help it but feel some level of endearment. So in Chinese, supposedly this also remembers stuff that you used to say, so you can have context that you draw back to. So you can very easily see that this is like an interaction that could actually work and that could be compelling. And that is kind of the vision of these like assistants. It's this vision where I dismissed this at first. I was like, this is science fiction, this cannot possibly be a thing. And then this is actual current research where people are trying to figure out a conversational agent with machine learning and all of the new technologies that is not as good as a human. That they want to make a conversational agent that is better than a human. Because humans, when they talk to each other, there's lots of inefficiencies, lots of things go wrong. So if you could make a chatbot that actually is perfect, that is super compelling and efficient and does everything perfectly, then what would you do with such a chatbot? So that's sort of the current research. And there is one problem there is that the only people who can play that game, this is the Conference for Machine Learning, are the biggest companies. So the people who have papers on the Conference for Machine Learning are Google, Microsoft, IBM, Facebook, Amazon, and then, yeah, just Peter's off. So I have to go quickly now a bit. So what are the tools that you can use? I already said that prototyping and testing are essential to do this. You have to have very quick prototyping loops and very quick ways of getting feedback and making things better. This is normal in every design process. This is normal, very normal in games where I come from. And it's essential in these kind of experiences. So with like an app or a website, you can get away with like slower cycles. But if you go to games and other really interactive and compelling things, then this becomes super necessary. We use specialized writing tools. This is Ginkgo, which is a branching storybook script editor, which was super useful for the stuff that we did. Later on, there's the thing called, this is Twine. This is a tool to make text adventures. And the text adventure is sort of a storytelling thing that you can also turn into a conversational interface. So Twine has nodes and connections, so if you can move from bits of story to other bits of story. And somebody made a renderer that renders this into a chat. So this is the Twine texting project that just takes the visual interface that you just saw and makes a chat. This is super useful for designing things. There are tools that do drag and drop like this, where you have like nodes that you can connect with your mouse. They're nice to get going, but they're a bit too slow and cumbersome to do some actual work in. So it's really cool to have a proof of concept like this, but if it becomes very complicated with thousands of rules, then you can imagine that this becomes super big and you can't work with it anymore. There's tools like this, like Layer, that have toolkits that give you the chat balloons already. Because I've tried making a chat balloon from scratch that works exactly like it's supposed to work. It's not very nice. So you better use the operating system stuff that's already there to help you out. And as I said, that you should not use natural language processing. There are things out there that make natural language processing easy. Most of them are from the big four, Microsoft, Google, etc., Facebook. This is Wit.ai, which is now owned by Facebook, I think. So for most companies, using a proprietary tool like that isn't very attractive because, like, first, your data's gone, and second, if you've got actual visitors, then the cost becomes so big that you can't really use it anymore. So there's also nice open source versions of these tools. This is Rasa, for instance, from Berlin, some guys. And so there's open source versions of most of the tools coming out to cater to people who can't use proprietary tools. So to round off the future and the thinking, like, isn't this a fad? So I thought I was going into this talk and I was going to look at my old examples, and I thought, like, maybe most of the examples I showed in previous talks are all dead. You know, maybe they're all gone. And if you look at the hype cycle, we just sort of before the peak. Yeah, I mean, it's this sort of more for fun. But I looked at all the old stuff, and a bunch of them had been bought. A couple had died off. But a lot of the chat initiatives that were out like beginning of last year are still going strong. They're still happening, and I think that just points towards huge growth in this field as a whole. So even if your early users get burned, even if they disappear, then there's just so many new people coming into this space that I think for some reason it is working. And there is a reason why I think this is such a big and important space. So. Not just for devices like Alexa, but also for VR and AR. It's like, if you're in VR, it's stupid to press buttons to get anything done. Like that, you feel like a monkey. You're in VR trying to use a keyboard. So it's obvious that you would have some way of talking to a computer to get your interaction happening. So the computer needs to be able to sort of understand you at a more basic level than just the physical, the tangible interaction. And that's what I always say when I talk about this phenomenon, is that I call it the UI for AI. Chat is the most natural way for us to interface with an AI. Because if something is smart, or if it pretends to be smart, it's weird to change it or by twisting some buttons. So you would actually want to talk to it to tell it what to do. And I'm trying to, like, this is Nikola Tesla, and I think that's sort of what the lightning bulb was for electricity. This was the first visible, omnipresent manifestation of a new technology. I think chat is for AI, so it's everywhere, and it leads back to this AI thing. But just like they had no idea what kind of revolution electricity would be just by giving light to us, I think chat has like a similar way to go for AI. That chat is the first AI thing that we have in the world now. We can talk to smart computers using our phones, but who knows where it will lead. So that's sort of my talk. Thanks.